It is February 26th, 2026. And, well, if you've checked your portfolio this morning, you probably already know the damage.
$285 billion.
$285 billion. That is the amount of market cap that just evaporated from the tech sector in, what, the last 48 hours?
It is brutal. I mean, the street is calling it a correction, but if you look at the underlying signal, it's a structural collapse. We are basically seeing the end of the traditional SaaS multiple.
Right, the SaaSpocalypse. Which sounds incredibly dramatic, I know, but we're doing a deep dive today into a new strategy document from EON AI Ventures.
Right, the Centaur Defense.
Exactly, the Centaur Defense. And reading through this, SaaSpocalypse feels less like hyperbole and more like a post-mortem for the whole seat-based license model.
Which was inevitable. I mean, we've been talking about this exact thing for a year.
Yeah.
The moment generative AI dropped the marginal cost of code creation to near zero, the idea that you could charge, I don't know, $20 a month per user for a CRM or a project management tool.
That math just stops working.
Totally stops working.
Because why pay a monthly fee for a tool when an AI agent can just build you a bespoke version of that tool in seconds?
Right, tailored exactly to your own data.
It's the commoditization trap. But what really makes this EON document fascinating to me isn't that they're predicting a crash. I mean, we are living in the crash right now.
Right.
It's that they are outlining this very specific, incredibly narrow survival strategy for the immediate future. They're calling it the Centaur Phase.
And that phase is critical. For everyone listening, the Centaur Phase is defined as this transitional window where a human AI team is vastly more productive than either a human working alone or an autonomous AI working alone.
Okay, but I want to drill down on the timeline they give for this phase because it jumped out at me immediately.
The 6 to 18 months.
Yes, 6 to 18 months. That is an insanely tight window for a massive corporate strategy shift.
It really is.
Usually you're looking at, 5-year plans. 6 months is barely enough time for a large enterprise to pilot a new software program, let alone completely pivot their entire business model.
Well, it speaks to the sheer velocity of the model evolution right now. The document is arguing that this Centaur Phase is strictly a transitional state.
So it's not the final destination.
No, not at all. We're basically in a dead sprint against the autonomous phase.
So if we're racing toward autonomy, why aren't we there yet? What's the roadblock?
EON calls it the 80% quality ceiling.
Let's unpack that metric for a second, because in the consumer space, or even creative work, 80% is actually fine.
Oh, it's great.
Right. If I ask an LLM to draft a marketing email or summarize a 1-hour meeting and it gets 80% of it right.
You spend 2 minutes tweaking it and you're happy.
Exactly. I've saved an hour of my day. High utility.
Right. But EON isn't looking at low-stakes creative work or administrative tasks. They are focused squarely on high-stakes industrial sectors.
So energy, aerospace, healthcare, defense.
Exactly. And in those environments, the error tolerance is effectively zero.
Because you can't really have an 80% success rate when you're balancing the pressure on an underwater oil pipeline.
Or performing thoracic surgery.
Wow, yeah.
The gap between 80% and 99.9% isn't just an annoyance there. It is the literal difference between a successful operation and a massive lawsuit, or a fatality.
And this is where the concept of the physical last mile comes in, right?
Yes. The document highlights that while AI is incredible at digital manipulation text, code, images, it totally lacks the grounded physical context to be fully autonomous in the real world.
It hallucinates.
It hallucinates. And look, in a text editor, a hallucination is just a funny typo.
Sure.
But in an oil refinery, a hallucination is a catastrophic explosion.
So the Centaur Defense is essentially a strategy to bridge that reliability gap. We are using humans as the guardrails for the AI, at least until the AI gets good enough to run itself.
I mean, that's the cynical take, but essentially, yes. Though EON frames it as building a trust architecture.
Trust architecture.
Right. They argue that to survive this SaaSpocalypse, you can't just sell software anymore. Software is cheap. You have to sell outcomes.
And to sell outcomes in safety-critical industries, you have to prove mathematically that your AI isn't going to break things or get someone killed.
Exactly.
That pivot from selling tools to selling guaranteed outcomes, that seems like the core economic shift of this whole document. Instead of selling a license to an enterprise training platform, they are selling the absolute guarantee that your workforce is fully ready.
Because outcomes are the only things with value left.
Okay, let's get into the actual mechanics of this trust architecture because they break it down into 3 specific pillars. And the first one is purely technical. They call it SAIQ.
The multi-LLM guard.
Right. And this is a really clever approach to the hallucination problem.
It is. Because normally, most people just interact with a single model. Say you're using GPT-5 or Claude,
You ask a question, it predicts the next token.
and it gives you an answer. But if that single model has a gap in its training data or a bias, it can give you a completely wrong answer, but sound incredibly confident doing it.
Which is terrifying in aerospace context.
Right, so SAIQ doesn't rely on one model. It chains 5 independent language models together,
5 of them.
5 distinct architectures. So when a query comes in, let's say a mechanic is asking about a safety procedure for a Boeing engine. SAIQ runs that exact query through all 5 models simultaneously.
So it's like a jury.
Exactly. It's consensus-based validation. If 4 models say turn the valve left and 1 model says turn it right, the system immediately flags the anomaly.
It doesn't just guess and hope for the best.
No, it stops and kicks that discrepancy over to a human for review.
Okay, but computationally speaking, that sounds wildly expensive. Running inference on 5 separate models for every single interaction, the latency alone must be noticeable.
Oh, it is definitely more expensive than a standard API call. There's no getting around that.
That's her.
But you have to compare the cost of 5 inferences against the cost of a commercial airplane engine failing mid-flight.
That's a fair point.
In the outcome economy, that extra latency and compute costs is just the price of insurance. And actually, it's not even just about chaining the models together. It's about what those models are trained on.
Right. The document mentions client material fidelity.
Yes, because one of the biggest risks right now in enterprise AI is model collapse or data contamination. You train your AI on the open internet, and suddenly it's learning how to fix a turbine from some random Reddit thread.
Or a Wikipedia article from 10 years ago.
Right, so EON completely cuts that off. The training environment is built strictly from the client's actual internal standard operating procedures, the SOPs.
So it's a completely walled garden, no outside internet noise.
A very high walled garden. And they deploy it on premises.
Oh, it's on-prem.
Yeah, and that's a crucial detail for sectors like defense and energy. They're never going to send their proprietary nuclear schematics to a public cloud. The AI lives securely inside the client's own firewall.
Okay, so pillar 1 is the safety net for the AI. It keeps the AI from making things up.
Right.
But pillar 2 seems to be the safety net for the human half of the Centaur. They call it Tri-Modal assessment. And this really stood out to me because, let's be honest, corporate training is historically terrible.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's just clicking through a slide deck and answering a multiple-choice quiz at the end.
Which proves absolutely nothing other than your ability to click a mouse before the timer runs out.
Exactly. But EON is arguing that in this Centaur phase, we actually have to validate real competence.
Because remember, the human is the final failsafe. If the SAIQ system flags an issue and pauses, the human operator actually has to know what to do next.
Right.
So this trimodal assessment totally ditches passive testing. Mode 1 is the oral AI exam.
And what does that actually look like, that AI just verbally interviews you?
Basically, yeah. It acts as an examiner in a Socratic dialogue. It might ask you to explain a really complex concept like the emergency shutdown sequence for a chemical reactor.
Okay.
And it listens to your voice.
Okay.
It analyzes your syntax, your hesitation, your sentiment. It's determining if you actually understand the core physics behind the procedure or if you've just memorized a checklist.
Wow, that is intimidating. You really can't fake your way through a Socratic interrogation like that.
And it's supposed to be intimidating. It's a filter. It instantly weeds out the people who just skimmed the safety manual.
So that's the first mode.
Right. The second mode is written theory, which is just your standard knowledge check. But the third mode is where they tackle that physical last mile we talked about earlier, hands-on XR performance.
Extended reality.
Yes. And we're not talking about a basic VR video game here. These are full physics-based simulations where the system is tracking your 3D spatial movement. So if you're training to, say, weld a high-pressure pipe joint, the XR system is constantly measuring your hand steadiness, the exact sequence of your micro movements, your timing.
So it's literally capturing muscle memory data.
Exactly. It bridges that massive gap between concept and physical action. Because there is a world of difference between knowing the theory of how to land a commercial jet.
And actually handling the yoke during a crosswind.
Exactly. The XR component mathematically validates that the human Centaur can physically execute the task under pressure.
And seeing how this connects back to the outcome economy makes total sense now. If EON's entire business model relies on guaranteeing a ready workforce, they need this extreme level of data to back up that guarantee.
Right.
They can't go to an oil company and say, well, he passed the written test. They have to say, we verified his hand-eye coordination and spatial reasoning during a simulated blowout event.
And suddenly, that verification data is the actual product. That is exactly what Wall Street wants to see right now, highly defensible metrics.
Speaking of defensible, let's move to the third pillar, the content moat. Because this is EON's defense against all the new competitors. The document states EON has a library of over 9,000 courses and 36 million XR assets.
Massive.
But my immediate thought reading that was, so what? In a world of generative 3D AI, can't a competitor just prompt a model to create a 3D V6 engine and get the exact same thing?
I mean, you can prompt it, sure, and the AI will spit out something that visually looks very much like a V6 engine.
Right.
But will it function?
Yeah.
Are the internal gear ratios accurate down to the micron? Is the thermal tolerance on the piston heads modeled correctly based on real-world metallurgy?
Probably not.
Definitely not.
Right on.
And that's the key difference between generative 3D models and verified engineering assets. Generative AI is just probabilistic. It's essentially guessing what an engine should look like based on scraped images.
Oh, okay.
EON's library is deterministic. It's built from 25 years of actual proprietary institutional data.
So the moat isn't really the raw volume of 36 million assets. The moat is the verification of those 36 million assets.
Precisely. If you are training an aviation mechanic to fix a very specific brand of turbine, you absolutely cannot train them on a statistically probable generic turbine.
You need the exact digital twin of that specific piece of hardware.
Exactly. And building a library of verified digital twins takes decades. You just cannot compress 25 years of engineering verification into a 6-month prompt engineering sprint.
Which brings up a fascinating competitive dynamic for the whole industry right now. We're seeing endless AI startups popping up, raising massive seed rounds, and promising to revolutionize enterprise training overnight.
Right.
But EON's argument here is that without that deep proprietary data layer, all those startups are basically just UI wrappers around a generic foundational model.
And wrappers are zero-moat businesses. They're easily copied by the next startup. That is exactly why the SaaS valuations are collapsing so violently right now.
Because if your whole value proposition is just a nice interface on top of GPT-5,
You don't actually have a business, you just have a feature.
yeah.
EON is betting everything that their content moat is the only thing that protects them from that rapid commoditization.
Okay, so we have the trust architecture, the Tri-Modal assessment, and the content mode. Let's look at the actual implementation, because they are targeting the exact sectors where the SaaSpocalypse is seen as an opportunity to slash costs.
Energy, aerospace, manufacturing.
Right, but there is a very specific metric mentioned in the document for surviving Phase 3, which is the eventual shift to the autonomous phase. They talk about needing a 95% success rate.
That is the magic number.
Yeah.
We established earlier that generic AI hits a hard ceiling at around 80% reliability.
Yes.
The Centaur Defense, this whole combination of the multi-LLM guards, the human-in-the-loop oversight, the verified 3D data, all of it, is engineered specifically to push that baseline reliability from 80% up to 95%.
And 95% is the threshold for what exactly? Just baseline drop.
It's the threshold for true scalability. At 95% reliability, the cost of having human oversight drops off a cliff.
Oh, I see.
You no longer need a human actively watching every single step of a process. You only need the human to handle the 5% of complex edge cases that the AI flags. That is the point where the economics of this outcome ecosystem really start printing money.
But wait, this brings us right back to that incredibly tight timeline. 6 to 18 months. If the ultimate goal of the Centaur phase is to train the AI up to 95% reliability,
Right.
what happens when they actually hit that number?
Well, that is the existential question lurking at the very end of this strategy document.
Because if the Centaur is purely a transitional phase and the final destination is 95% autonomous capability, doesn't that inherently imply that the human half of the Centaur is actively working to make themselves obsolete?
To a large degree, yes. The better the human operator trains the AI, the more edge cases they solve, the more SOPs they help verify, the less the AI actually needs them. We are essentially building the ladder that we are eventually going to kick away.
That feels like an incredibly grim incentive structure for a worker. Train the system perfectly so your company can eventually stop paying you.
I wouldn't say it's an outright elimination of the human, but it's definitely a radical shift in their role. The document hints heavily at a move toward governance.
Governance.
Right. The human stops being the doer and becomes the auditor. You're no longer the pilot flying the cargo plane. You're sitting in a control room managing a fleet of 20 autonomous cargo planes.
Sure, but logically you need vastly fewer auditors than you do pilots.
Significantly fewer. And that is the harsh, broader macroeconomic reality of the SaaSpocalypse. We are shifting from a labor-intensive services economy to a compute-intensive outcome economy.
Yeah.
The Centaur Defense is a brilliant corporate survival strategy to bridge that transition. But for the individual worker out there, it's a massive wake-up call.
It almost makes the Tri-Modal assessment seem like it's not just about workplace safety. It's about aggressively filtering the workforce down to just the absolute elite.
That is a very fair reading of the subtext.
Finding the tiny fraction of people who can handle that remaining 5% of chaos that the AI just can't resolve.
Exactly. Because if the AI can perfectly handle the routine 95% of tasks, the market value of a routine worker drops to zero.
Wow.
But the value of the elite expert problem solver, the person who can safely improvise when the verified procedure completely fails, their value goes through the roof.
So the overarching message to you, the listener, whether you're working in tech or oil and gas or healthcare, is that the era of good enough is officially over.
It's totally dead. The enterprise market simply will not pay for it anymore, and the underlying technology is rapidly making it obsolete anyway. You either offer highly verified, high-stakes expertise, or you are directly competing with an algorithm that costs pennies to run.
Well, that is a rather harsh reality check for a Thursday morning deep dive.
It is.
Yeah.
But you also have to look at the massive opportunity here. We are finally shedding the bloat of the whole SaaS era.
True, the shelfware.
Exactly. The shelfware, the unused enterprise licenses, the generic chatbot tools that didn't actually solve anything. We are moving toward a world where technology is forced to actually deliver on its promises.
Yeah, you can't fake an outcome.
Right. Outcome-based sounds like corporate buzzword bingo, but if it actually results in healthcare systems that cure more patients and energy grids that don't constantly fail under load, that is a massive net positive for society.
That is very true. But the transition period, that fast-approaching 18-month window, is going to be incredibly messy.
Structural disruption is always messy. The winners in this next phase will be the companies who acknowledge the physical last mile and deeply respect the need for verified proprietary data.
And the losers.
The losers will be the ones still trying to sell monthly seats for a generic software wrapper.
Well, on that note, I think we've thoroughly unpacked the Centaur Defense. It is a brilliant, slightly terrifying strategy for the end of the software world and the beginning of, well, whatever comes next.
The outcome economy.
The outcome economy. I will definitely be thinking about that 95% threshold all week. Because really, if this Centaur phase only lasts 18 months, what exactly does that human-AI partnership look like when the AI crosses the 96% mark?
It's the multi-trillion-dollar question.
It really is. Thank you for guiding us through the end of the SaaS world as we know it.
My pleasure. Just keep your hands on the wheel for now.
Will do. And thanks to all of you for listening. We will see you in the next deep dive.